Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business Unicorns podcast. I'm here with Mr. Mark Fisher, the one and the only. How are you, sir?
I am doing great. We are in the past as the time this is recording. We're recording this at the end of November, and we're getting ahead on the podcast. I hope nothing of historical import happens in the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, we'll feel so awkward not commenting on it.
We'll look so foolish. We'll look so foolish.
My greatest fear. I'll be so ashamed.
Well, today I'm excited for this conversation. Because we started doing this thing in the last year or so called Mentorship Days, where basically people come and spend a whole day with Mark and I, either virtually or in person. And these have been some of my favorite days of this last year, honestly, work-wise, right? Because it's been so fun to do deep dives into people's businesses. And we want to kind of talk about that process today, how all of you listening can get involved and come do that with us. And I think there's also things Mark and I have learned from these deep dives we can share on today's calls. Certainly, I know I have a long list of things I've learned. But maybe, Fish, you want to start where this idea came from and how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of came from acknowledging the fact that I think twofold. I think starting with the value to people that might want to do this. The reality is not everyone is a joiner. Mm-hmm. Not everyone is a joiner. And frankly, this is something that makes sense for us too. Like more and more, we are always open and usually, have been historically involved in some kind of group. And more, we are just willing to spend even more money to buy more speed. So we are willing to, make at least pitches, whether they get accepted or not, that's up to the person. But oftentimes, if there's someone we want to learn from, rather than joining their group for the year, we would rather just give them a ton of money and hang out with them for an hour or two, whatever is necessary to extract from them their insight and what they can tell us to really move the ball forward for us, right? Now, oftentimes this is an absurd amount of money, but frankly, it can save a little bit of money on the year-long investment and gets us what we want faster, particularly if it's like a highly leveraged group and we want to talk to the person. We want to talk to the person that's doing all the thing. And likewise, it became clear there was a certain percentage of people in our audience that for any number of reasons, they didn't want to join Unicorn Society. They didn't feel like they needed the ongoing support and accountability, right? And I always advocate, this is the talking point of all these groups, which I think is painting with too broad of a brush of you need accountability. And the reality is that I think that is true for maybe I don't know, 70 to 80% of people. They probably really do need some pressure. And that's a lot of the Unicorn Society is, quite frankly, is somebody check in on you. There's weekly texts. We're constantly creating the next thing, one thing at a time. But there's a certain type of cyborg, and I certainly put myself in this category where I just need the plan and then it's going to happen. I don't need all the other things, but I really need the plan. I really need the outside eye. And I also need someone to have enough context with my business so they can really guide me in the direction I want to go to. So because some people didn't want the ongoing stuff, and also not to be underappreciated because, and this is one of the hilarious side effects, I've worked with a number of gym owners that want to be down low because they have a very personal relationship with another business coach they've worked with for a long time, and they don't want anyone to know that we hung out. But sometimes that's the thing too. They already have a resource that they really, really love, but they
also want a mistress
me or you to give them 2 cents.
Yeah. There's one.
So
on the side.
That's a little bit about, we'll tell you a little bit more about I think the how the day works and its value, but I think it's a little bit of sort of where this was born out of. Anything you would add to that?
No, I just reiterate. I think there's a lot of folks who, like you said, are self-sufficient in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs are. In fact, it's a big reason why people choose to be self-employed is because you're driven enough to motivate yourself, and you have the discipline and drive to get things done without a lot of outside help and support. It's not everyone, but it's a good portion of people who start businesses are self-starters. And so, for those people who don't really need a group like Unicorn Society, at least on an ongoing basis, you just want to do a deep dive with some experts with an outside perspective on your business. That's exactly what this is. I think there's a lot of folks out there who this could be a great fit for. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, for what it's worth too, it's worth knowing a meaty percentage of people that have done this ultimately have gone on to join the Unicorn Society or
have already been.
Yeah. And there's other bells and whistles the Unicorn Society has that this doesn't include, right? There's
of course.
lots of playbooks and the reality that there's something to be able to calibrate in real time and have access to, even talk to you in night office hours or work with a coach, of course, come in the retreats, being part of the community. I don't want to undersell the value of the coaching group. I think probably for more people than not, it's probably is the better solution. But in
100%.
practice,
Yeah.
this is a way to really kind of kickstart things. And in fact, interestingly enough, there's a lot of support included in the Unicorn Society. But for what's worth, if you're listening as a Unicorn Society member, we do offer this at a discounted rate, barring we have availability. That's one of the constraints of this, unfortunately, is you and I don't have unlimited amount of time to do this. So it's part of why we're doing the podcast is we're starting to book now for Q1. So Unicorn Society individuals, if you want to do this with us, you do get a discount off the full rate, because this is a little bit different, in part because part of why this is a larger commitment on behalf of the people to do this is you and I are going to take a couple. I mean, I don't know how long it takes. It takes me like a solid 2 hours.
Yeah,
because I'm reviewing everything. I'm looking at all your SOPs. I'm looking at your website, your Instagram. I'm looking at your P&Ls, your dashboards. I'm going to make you fill out a bunch of both quantitative and qualitative stuff.
We send you a giant questionnaire.
Yeah. And basically, the goal for this ideally is a year of coaching in a day. So this is not the thing where you show up either in person or on Zoom or like, okay, so tell me about your business, right? That's all done in advance. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, when I do these, a lot of what I do is frankly move through a giant list of follow-up questions I have on all the things. But my goal for this is you don't have to do that, because we want to use our time effectively. So we start the day, we can really hit the ground running, because you and I have done our absolute level best to become a true expert on your business and look over everything with a fine-tooth comb. Because of course, when we're deciding the best use of your time and the order with which we should go after things, you kind of need to know a lot of stuff, right? And I've been transparent. My strong preference is I don't think I'm as that useful to somebody if I have like an hour. I think I'm great if you show up my office hours and ask some questions. I can give you some answers. But I would really want to make sure if I work with people, or I should say what I love about this format is it helps me understand, at least as best that I can, not saying I'm perfect, that we're solving the right thing. Because one of the challenges sometimes if people are coming, a lot of times the problem people think they have is not, to my mind, the most foundational problem.
It's a symptom.
Sure, when we get to some of our learnings, what we discover is there's some foundational model problems, right? And the issue is, I always joke about this one, and I don't mean to trigger you if you're like, this is my issue. But oftentimes they're like, oh, the issue is, the structure of my team's continuing education program, or the structure of our milestone customer service program is not. And it's like, no, the problem is you're only getting 2 leads per week. That's the problem, Or
the problem is your rent. Your rent is 75% of your expenses.
And I'm please understand, I'm having fun, but I don't take this lightly. I understand that can be sobering. And for what it's worth too, I understand, I really appreciate when someone is willing to do this, because, I understand we do this too. There's a certain amount of vulnerability of kicking open the hood and having someone be like, hey, can you look for the things that aren't working and tell me? And that requires a certain amount of trust. Now is a good time to acknowledge, we take the confidentiality piece very, very seriously, because certainly we also have to understand your life. We understand what's going on with your family situation, what kind of capacity you have. Do you have aging parents? Do you have young kids? Is there, a family money situation that is impacting things one way or the other, So all that stuff, we can come in really deeply understanding your situation and clear on what your goals are for the next 1, 3, 5 years. And then we can sculpt a plan that makes sense to send you off the next 3 to 6 months, where again, assuming that you're that kind of cyborg, you can go and take action. And then of course, listen, a lot of people do decide they want our ongoing support after. That's amazing. And
great.
You wanted that. We'd love nothing more than to get to have you join our community. But we also understand for some people, this is probably a better way to go. So anyway, I'll pull up there in case you have.
Maybe I'll just kind of walk through the nuts and bolts of how it works, and maybe we'll start talking a little about some themes of things people have learned so far from some of them. But I'll just say this really is for the person who wants. I don't even know if what I would call this is coaching. We call it a mentorship day, I think, for a reason, because this is really about high level strategy more than anything else.
Yeah.
This is about us just looking at, from the 5,000, 10,000 foot view at your business. We're getting into the weeds a little bit, right? And certainly on the things that matter most to you and what you need to work on. But this is really a high level strategy meeting. So if you know that you know how to execute the shit out of a plan, and you just want someone to help you make the plan, and you're going to leave this meeting with, like Mark said, 3, 6, 12 months worth of planning, right? We're going to tell you what to do over the next 3, 6, 12 months. And depending on how much you have to walk through, depends on how long your plan is. But essentially, the way the process works is if you say yes, Mark and I send you this big, long list of things to give us. We ask you some quantitative and qualitative questions. We'll ask you for your P&L, all kinds of things. Many of them are the tools and templates you've heard us talk about here on this podcast. We'll ask you to do some of those self-assessments and send it to us. And then what we do is we spend anywhere from, I don't know, if it's 1 to 3 hours going through all of that stuff, and we turn it into a report. And while Mark and I's reports might look a little differently, they're functionally doing the same thing. It's basically our analysis of all the information that you gave us, including some of our initial thoughts and questions about what you might work on next. So already when we sit down for minute 1 of our mentorship day, we're having looked through all your material, made our own list of questions and notes, and started to put together a rough draft of what we think a plan might look like. And then we spend in our mentorship day somewhere around 2 to 4 hours. And we have a longer version you could do if you really want a full day. I think we have an option for that, or we did before. We will go through our plan, ask all of our questions, and you will leave our mentorship day, whether it's a short day or a full day, with a plan for the next 3, 6, 12 months, based on real deep analysis and of your data, and combined with all of our experience. And the people who've walked away so far from the ones I've done, and we've done a handful so far, the number one thing they walk away with is a real sense of clarity of what their priorities are, right? More so when they walk to the door, more so than they do our regular process of quarterly planning, right? Because it's just so much a deeper look. Another thing that they often walk away with, almost all the folks, is some sense of no stone left unturned, right? Like, I don't know what that feeling is. I can't think of the feeling word for that, but some sense of like, oh, I really did pull back all the curtains and looked in all the closets and looked underneath all the mattresses. We looked everywhere. And I feel there's an extra sense of confidence that comes with your plan when you know you've really looked from all the angles. We've taken the time throughout the whole day of this mentorship day with us to really look at your business from all the angles, from the personal angle, from the money angle, from the client perspective, right? And because we have the time, people have been leaving these with real confidence that their plan actually makes sense and reflects reality, which I think is so valuable. And then the third thing I'll say, which is the theme through a lot of the ones I've done so far, is they leave with some sense that they're not in it alone. Right, some sense that these are not just their ideas that have that are daydreams they've had, but they've been real vetted in real collaboration. And sometimes we've done this with, and you've done a few with single business owners. Some I've done with partnerships in the room, but they leave with some sense of like, these ideas have all been vetted, and I've been collaborating with Michael or Mark on this, and I'm not alone in thinking this is a great path forward. And there's some that just comes with that extra sense of confidence to sprint forward as fast as they can. Yeah.
I think
anything you would add to that?
I was going to say another way that you might think about this is, obviously, if someone does the Unicorn Society, we're going to provide you a lot of structures and frameworks for how to think about that. We will be accessible to you to help you, support you in deciding what to do when, right? Because the whole game is you're just trying to figure out what's the constraint, what is the order to go after what things, what tools do I use to fix whatever constraint is. And the difference, I think, with this is less like we are coaching you how to remove and give you frameworks to help you think about this, to help you make the decisions. This is more like we're joining your team for the day, right? We're becoming your COO for the day, and we are with you. And ultimately, the reality is you're always going to make your own decisions, right? Like again, if you're looking for the like mean mom and yell at you, like that's not going to happen here. We're adults. You're in charge of your life. You are the king and queen of your business. So you can decide what to do.
Literally, the first line of my report always says, "You are the boss of your business." All of the recommendations in this report are just my ideas. Like you get to decide at the end of the day, and you have to own the decision about what you're going to do. Does it make sense if not?
Yeah, and ultimately, like you're in charge. What you don't have to worry about us doing is, we're not going to not be direct. Like we'll be direct about like what we think you should do,
Yeah,
but we also have great respect. Like, listen, it's your business, it's your life. You do whatever you want to do, but based on what we know about your life situation, as your teammate in that moment, that's what we would recommend. So,
yeah,
um, I know that we could talk maybe a little bit about more how I'll talk maybe a little about the logistics and then maybe like a few final thoughts. Maybe we
sure.
can riff on some of the things we've learned, some maybe trends we've seen or things that our own thing has evolved. But, sort of just give you a little more context what this looks like if you want to do it. The way it would work is we have a full day option, we have a half day option. It's a big commitment. It's pretty expensive. Okay. Value is definitely there. It's cheaper than doing a full year of Unicorn Society, but like it's not a small commitment because our time is valuable and you'll get a lot of value to this and it's well worth you doing, but we should start by acknowledging that.
Yep.
And essentially, you can either come to New York City, or we can do it in person, which I'll speak for probably both of us and say that's our strong preference. I
We
think
love
it's a
that.
lot more fun. And we spend the day together and, we rent out a beautiful, comfortable place and we have coffee or tea or whatever is delicious for you to drink and feel caffeinated. And then we end the day, we'll buy you a nice dinner and we'll hang out, we'll break bread and we'll talk shop, talk about life, just kind of catch up and sort of end the day to close the circle. So if you do that in New York City, that's the way that works. And again, there's a full day and a half day option. Or if you prefer, if resources are constrained, if you're in a family situation, you can't get away, we're sensitive to that too. So we do have a Zoom option. So the Zoom option, the same deal. The only difference is we're just doing everything virtually, which means we can't have dinner together, which is sad for us. But at the same time, we know that makes it more accessible. We know we have people that are literally on the, I did this with hi Brian, who I'm sure you listened to this, who's in Hong Kong, who's on the other side of the world. So it allows us to work with people, that just can't get to New York City for any reason. So that's some logistics. I think there'll be a link in the show notes here. Basically, you can DM us on Instagram and say mentorship. And we can tell you more details about what booking looks like, because again, one of the constraints are we don't have, unfortunately, unlimited availability to do this.
Yeah,
Remember, Unicorn
each one can
Society,
take like a day and a half of our time,
yep,
right? So it's
yep.
it's a big investment.
It's a big one. So Unicorn Society members, remember, if you're listening, you get access to this at a pretty discounted rate. So you can feel free to reach out. We'll talk about that more to see if that is something you might want to use to supplement the support you're already getting. So that's how this works logistically. I guess, as we close up here, I'm wondering if there's any trends you've seen or things that, you've learned that are evolving your thinking.
I'll say this to all of our listeners out there who may not be a right fit for this. I think there's also a takeaway here for all of you, which is all too often, we don't really give ourselves the gift of real time to think about and plan for our business.
Yes.
And I think, we've been in the habit of doing this maybe more than most. We've been following the, EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System, or our very own version of it called Frameworks for Unicorns for many years. And so we do take 2 whole days to do annual planning every December and sit down and talk about our business in a deep level. We hire an outside person to come in and help facilitate that meeting. Yep. So me and Mark and Ben and Pete can really be available to talk about business for unicorns and have that. But that's a real gift to give yourselves, that gift of time, that investment of time and energy to really sit down and think deeply without being rushed about your business is huge. So whether you have the energy and the capacity or the resources to work with Mark and I and do it together or not, go do it on your own, right? Give yourself the gift of that time to sit down and really think deeply and invite maybe some fresh thinkers into that conversation with you, right? Invite some people, someone who owns another kind of business, sit down and with you and have lunch and spend an hour or two thinking deeply about your business. Invite someone who you admire to pay them maybe a little bit less for their time, right? Or buy them some dinner, right? A family member who you admire who's ran their own business, right? But I think there's just something about this that feels so luxurious in this day and age.
Yes.
Like it feels right. And it doesn't have to be, right? I mean, certainly doing it with us, like Mark said, it's not the cheapest, but it's so worth it. And I think even if you do it on your own, you'll get some benefit from giving yourself the gift of that time.
Yep. All right. Well, anything else you want to share here before we bring this to a close?
I don't think so. I think that
you want to share that you've seen in the.
Well, I mean, there's so many kind of trends we've seen in the way people think with the businesses and the kinds of things they need to work on. But I think I'll probably go back and maybe just reiterate kind of what you said, which is some people just don't know the foundational numbers about their business model, right? Yep. And they're struggling to make something profitable, but they're really they have a kind of a blind spot typically about one area of the business where they just are not recognizing that like that doesn't work. That
Yep.
part of your model is just broken. And some very common ones is having too much space and paying too much rent.
Yep.
Super common one. Paying too much for your people costs, right? That paying, more than 40% of your expenses in people costs is huge. And it's because we love our people and we care about them, but we've just kind of overpaid them over the years. And that's hard to pull back
Yep.
on. Another really obvious one is just not charging enough for your services.
Yep.
Almost, just like, almost everyone we talk to, we're like, well, you need to do a rate increase. When was the last time you did one? Oh, never? Okay, let's get on that, right? And so some of these are pretty low hanging fruit. And they're so foundational to your business. It's the water that you swim in. So you don't even think to look at it. You don't even think to say, oh, wow, maybe I did sign a lease that's too much in my rent. What do I do about that? Well, there's things you can do. Even the most
Yep.
foundational things, like a lease you signed, we've worked with now, I'm sure, probably dozens and dozens of Unicorn Society members to renegotiate their lease, give back pieces of their space, sublet their space to other people. So no matter how broken foundationally your business model might be, there are ways to
Yeah.
fix it. And
Yep.
I think sitting down with someone who has an outside perspective and can point them out to you will make the game easier for you to win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything you would add to that?
I mean, those are certainly the main ones. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I will say that it's one thing I've noticed as a trend. It is very rare that a gym owner is not offering too many sessions. Oftentimes, we
Yeah.
see the utilization rate is just too low. There's a lot of build and hope that will come. Right, I
Yeah.
see a lot of gym owners have more space than they actually need, more staff, paid more than they really should be paying, and offering too many sessions because they're thinking like, okay, well, we're gonna scale up, we're gonna double our business. It's like it's true, but like you're so far from doubling the business. And then, of course, if we look at their leads, they're getting 2 to 3 leads per week. It's like, okay, well, in 1,000 years, we're never going to scale up to need this much space or this much staff or these many sessions.
Yeah.
That's a flip. That's maybe not entirely fair, but yeah, I would toss those on the Barbie as other consistent issues that we tend to see.
It's
The final one,
I,
I think a lot of this a
oh,
lot. One of my new rallying cries is the time spent on marketing is the atomic unit
mm-hmm.
of marketing success. Right? You cannot expect to spend 90 minutes per week on marketing. And I understand a lot of you are busy. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't spend 90 minutes on marketing and think the business is going to grow. Maybe one other one that we always check in on is how many hours are you on the floor,
Yeah.
right? I realize there's not a magic wand. There's not a perfect Band-Aid for that, depending on the inflection point of your business, because sometimes it's chicken and the egg, right? You don't make enough money to hire help. But if you don't hire help, you can't make any more money because the business can't grow, right? And I understand that can be a little bit gnarly. Again, I would say this in general, most people that do the mentorship day are a little bit further along in their journey. Usually the
Sure.
person's looking for this kind of help. They need, I think, a little bit more of a sophisticated eye, because the beginning, I'm not saying it's easy, but a lot of the stuff in the beginning is like relatively simple to get to a certain point. It becomes more important. I think the bigger your revenues are and the bigger dream you're pursuing, the more scale you may or not choose to be dealing with. Because the last thing I'll see as a rule is usually too many services. The last
Mm-hmm.
too many is like
Yeah.
too many services, too hard to do quality control on 5 things, because each of them need their own systems and SOPs and quality control systems, and different staff will lend themselves to different services more or less easily. So anyway, I will toss those in the Barbie, some other things that I look for that I often see could be tweaked when I do these days.
Yeah. I'm sure we could turn this into a 3-hour podcast listing all the things that we've seen doing all these mentorship. But I will just go back and say that we have had people do this at all different age businesses. So we've had some people that are just a few years in that do mentorship that just have maybe like 1 or 2 employees. And we've had some that are, that have been around for much longer and much bigger, more sophisticated businesses. So this opportunity is not specific to any one point in the growth of your business. I think it can be helpful at any stage. Anyone who wants more clarity about what's coming next and what your priorities are can be super valuable.
I know. I actually would love to. I realize money is tight at the beginning, but I think that the best time to do this is the best time to plant a tree was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think the best time to do this would be if you're listening and you're planning to open up a gym in the next 1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it when it's like 2 years off, right? That might be too far away for it to be valuable.
Yeah.
But wow, if we could just help you, and we do, for what it's worth, we have a course, Open Strong, which you can find on our website. But yeah, because we've been doing so many of these, I've been thinking a lot about how do I help make people make better decisions up front
From
and
the
have
beginning.
less things to unwind later.
Yes.
It's not that you can't, you can, but it does cause grief and pain and stress and frustration and cost money.
Yep.
Whereas if the model makes sense from the jump, then I think we would probably save a lot of time and grief. How realistic that is or not, I'm not sure, but I would acknowledge, if you're listening to this and you don't have a gym yet, but you plan to open one soon, this might be a super powered version of the Open Strong course.
Yeah.
Again, certainly that's valuable too, and we've priced that to make it easy to access for people that are more early stage. But
Yeah.
just throwing it out there that we're happy to chat earlier rather than later.
Yeah, hell, if you come to a mentorship day, we'll give you the damn course. But for those of you who can't afford the mentorship day, go buy the course. It's a really great head start, and a lot of the metrics we're talking about in this conversation are in there to help you avoid some of those early mistakes. Well, thanks, Fisher. This is great. I'm glad we got to talk about this together. In fact, this might be the longest conversation you and I have had about mentorship days since we started doing them.
I think that might be true.
So it's been fun to catch up about how it's been going for you too. So, dear friends, go click the link in the show notes if you want to learn more about mentorship days. If not, we still hope you found this episode to be valuable and you're walking away with some good notes. Thanks as always, Fisher, and y'all have a kick-ass week. Bye.